The bleach hit my charcoal gray suit like acid rain. $2,000 of Italian wool, ruined in seconds. Karen stood there, empty container in her trembling hands, screaming words that still echo in my nightmares. Stop looking rich. People like you do not belong here. My skin burned where the chemicals soaked through the fabric. Other residents watched from their windows, phones recording, but nobody moved to help. Nobody dared to challenge Karen. She was the HOA enforcer, the neighborhood queen, the woman who decided who belonged and who did not. But as I stood there in that parking garage, bleach dripping from my sleeves, something shifted inside me. Karen had no idea who she was dealing with. She had no clue about the papers sitting in my home office, the documents that would change everything. That was the moment I decided to destroy her world completely. 6 months ago, I thought I had found paradise. Willowbrook Gardens looked like something from a magazine. Perfectly manicured lawns, pristine sidewalks, elegant townhouses arranged in neat rows. The HOA promised peace, order, and community standards that would protect property values. I am a successful business owner, but I have always preferred staying under the radar. No flashy cars, no designer clothes unless absolutely necessary. Just quiet success and the freedom to live my life without drama. After years of building my company from nothing, I wanted a place where I could relax and blend in. That plan lasted exactly 3 weeks. Karen Middleton introduced herself on a Tuesday morning while I was checking my mail. She appeared out of nowhere, clipboard in hand, wearing the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. Average height, perfectly styled blonde hair, and the unmistakable aura of someone who lived to control others. "You must be the new resident in Unit 47, she said, looking me up and down like I was a specimen under a microscope. "I am Karen, the HOA compliance coordinator. We need to discuss some concerns." I had not even unpacked completely, but apparently my Honda Accord was parked 3 inches outside the designated lines. My welcome mat was the wrong shade of brown. The small potted plant on my balcony violated Section 12 of the community guidelines. Karen rattled off violations like a machine gun, each one more ridiculous than the last. "We maintain standards here," she explained, her voice dripping with false authority. "People pay good money to live in Willowbrook Gardens. We cannot have residents who think the rules do not apply to them." I apologized and fixed everything immediately. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Over the following months, Karen escalated her harassment campaign. She photographed my car from every angle, looking for parking violations. She measured the exact height of my grass with a ruler. She knocked on my door at 7 in the morning to complain about the volume of my television the night before, even though I had been reading in complete silence. The pattern became clear. Karen was not enforcing HOA rules. She was enforcing her own twisted version of social control. She targeted anyone who seemed successful, confident, or independent. Young families, minorities, professionals who dressed well for work. Anyone who threatened her self-appointed position as neighborhood queen. Other residents warned me in whispers. Mrs. Chen from Unit 32 told me how Karen had called the police on her teenage son for walking through the complex after dark. Mr. Rodriguez mentioned the anonymous complaints filed against his small business clients who visited his home office. Dr. Williams, a retired professor, described months of harassment over his book collection being visible through his window. "Just keep your head down," they all said. "Do not give her ammunition. It is easier to avoid her than fight her." I tried following their advice. I followed every rule, dotted every I, crossed every T, but Karen was not interested in compliance. She was interested in dominance. The more I tried to appease her, the more aggressive she became. Last week, she cornered me in the mailroom and delivered her most direct threat yet. "I know your type," she hissed, standing uncomfortably close. "You think because you wear expensive clothes and drive a nice car that you are better than everyone else here. You think you can waltz into our community and show off your money without consequences." My Honda Accord was 7 years old. My clothes came from department stores, not boutiques. But in Karen's twisted worldview, anyone who looked successful was automatically a threat that needed to be eliminated. "I have been watching you," she continued, "taking notes, building a case. You have no idea how much power I have in this community. One word from me, and the HOA board will make your life here impossible." That night I made a decision. Karen wanted a war. She was about to get one. But first, I had an important business meeting to attend, a presentation that required my best suit and complete focus. I had no idea that Karen was planning her most vicious attack yet. Thursday morning started like any other day. My alarm buzzed at 6:30 and I went through my usual routine. Shower, coffee, morning news. But today was different. Today, I had the biggest presentation of my career scheduled for 9 o'clock. 3 potential investors, each worth millions, would decide the future of my company expansion. I pulled my charcoal gray suit from the closet with extra care. Italian wool, custom tailored, purchased 3 years ago to celebrate my first major business success. It was not just clothing. It was armor, confidence wrapped in fabric, the suit that made me feel ready to conquer the world. The reflection in my bedroom mirror showed a man prepared for victory. Crisp white shirt, silver tie, leather shoes polished to perfection. This presentation would change everything. The contracts in my briefcase represented months of planning, research, and negotiation. Success was within reach. I grabbed my keys and headed for the underground parking garage. The morning air was crisp, and my footsteps echoed against the concrete walls. Unit 47 had an assigned spot near the elevator, convenient and well lit, perfect for a quick exit to important meetings. That was when I saw her. Karen emerged from behind a concrete pillar like a spider waiting in her web. She wore an old tracksuit and carried what looked like a cleaning container. Her face was twisted with rage, eyes wild with an emotion I could not immediately identify. Later, I would recognize it as pure, unadulterated jealousy. "There he is," she snarled, pointing at me like I was a criminal. "Mr. Fancy Suit thinks he owns this place." I stopped walking and tried to process what was happening. Karen looked unhinged, dangerous in a way I had never seen before. The container in her hands was large, industrial-looking, with liquid sloshing inside. "Karen, I am running late for an important meeting," I said, keeping my voice calm and reasonable. "Is there something specific you need to discuss?" "Oh, there is plenty to discuss," she screamed, loud enough to echo through the entire garage. "You think you can parade around here in your expensive clothes, making the rest of us look poor. You think you can show off your wealth and make families feel inadequate." This was insane. My suit cost money, yes, but it was hardly a display of extreme wealth. I worked hard, saved carefully, and bought quality items that would last. Since when was dressing professionally a crime? "You are making a mistake," I said, backing toward my car. "I have never done anything to hurt you or anyone else in this community." "Liar," she shrieked. "Every day you walk around here like you own the place, looking down on hardworking families, flaunting your success. Well, I am going to teach you about humility." That was when she raised the container above her head. Time slowed to a crawl. I saw the liquid arc through the air, heard Karen screaming, felt my world explode into chaos. The bleach hit my suit with a splash that seemed to echo forever. Chemical smell filled my nostrils. Cold liquid soaked through expensive fabric and touched my skin. "Stop looking rich," Karen screamed at the top of her lungs. "People like you do not belong here. This is what happens when you show off." The pain hit me like electricity. Bleach on exposed skin burns like fire. I ripped off my suit jacket and threw it to the ground, checking my arms and neck for chemical damage. Thank God the worst of it had hit fabric instead of flesh, but my wrists were already turning red. "You are insane," I gasped, staring at the ruined suit pooled at my feet. $2,000 of clothing destroyed in seconds. Months of planning for this presentation, ruined by a jealous neighbor with a personality disorder. Karen stood there grinning like she had won the lottery. "Maybe now you will learn some respect. Maybe now you will understand that actions have consequences." Other residents began appearing from stairwells and elevators. Mrs. Chen, Mr. Rodriguez, Dr. Williams, and several others I recognized from the mailroom. They stood in shocked silence, phones appearing in trembling hands, recording the aftermath of Karen's attack. "Somebody call the police," I shouted, pulling out my own phone with shaking fingers. "This woman just assaulted me with a chemical weapon." "Overreacting as usual," Karen laughed, tossing the empty container aside like trash. "I barely touched you. You are just angry because someone finally put you in your place." But her laughter died when she heard the sirens approaching in the distance. Someone had already called 911. Karen's moment of triumph was about to become her worst nightmare. She just did not know it yet. Chaos erupted in the parking garage like a bomb had exploded. My skin burned where bleach had soaked through my shirt. The chemical smell made my eyes water and my throat close up. I stumbled toward the emergency wash station near the maintenance room, desperate to flush the chemicals off my skin before permanent damage occurred. Mrs. Chen rushed over with a bottle of water from her purse. "Rinse your arms," she said urgently. "Get that bleach off before it burns deeper." The cold water provided immediate relief, but the damage was already done. Red welts appeared on my wrists where the chemicals had made direct contact. My expensive suit lay crumpled on the concrete floor like a dead animal, fabric dissolving where the bleach had hit strongest. Karen stood frozen in the middle of the garage, finally beginning to realize what she had done. The empty container lay at her feet like evidence at a crime scene. Other residents formed a loose circle around us, phones recording every word, every reaction, every moment of her complete breakdown. "I was just making a point," she said to no one in particular. "He needed to learn some humility. People cannot just show off their wealth without consequences." "You assaulted him with a chemical weapon," Dr. Williams said, his voice shaking with anger. "You could have blinded him. You could have caused permanent scarring." "Do not be so dramatic," Karen snapped, but her confidence was cracking. "It was just bleach, just a little lesson about community standards." I finished rinsing my arms and pulled out my phone to document everything. Photos of my ruined suit, close-ups of the chemical burns on my skin, video of Karen still ranting about community standards and appropriate behavior. Evidence that would prove beyond any doubt what had happened here. "The police are coming," Mr. Rodriguez called from the elevator area. "I called 911 when I heard the screaming." Karen's face went white. "The police? This is a private community matter. We handle our own disputes through the HOA board." "The HOA board does not handle chemical assaults," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. This is criminal behavior, Karen. You just destroyed property and caused bodily harm. Bodily harm, she laughed, but the sound was hollow and desperate. You are fine. Your skin is barely pink. You are overreacting because someone finally stood up to your arrogance. The sirens grew louder, echoing off the concrete walls. Karen looked around frantically, as if searching for an escape route or allies who would back up her version of events. She found neither. This is harassment, she declared, pointing at the residents filming her. You are all conspiring against me because I enforce community standards, because I protect property values and maintain order. You maintain terror, Mrs. Chen said quietly. You have been terrorizing this community for months. Today you went too far. Two police officers entered the garage, hands resting casually on their equipment belts. They took in the scene quickly. The ruined suit, the empty bleach container, the chemical burns on my arms, and Karen standing in the middle of it, all like the eye of a hurricane. We received reports of an assault, the first officer said. Who wants to tell us what happened here? Karen opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. Officer, my name is David Martinez. This woman threw bleach on me and destroyed my property because she objected to the clothes I was wearing. The officer looked at Karen with raised eyebrows. Is that accurate, ma'am? He was showing off, Karen said weakly, flaunting his wealth, making other residents feel inferior. I was just trying to teach him about community standards. The second officer was already taking photos of my suit and the bleach container. Ma'am, regardless of your motivations, throwing chemicals on another person constitutes assault. We are going to need you to come with us. Karen's world began crumbling in real time, but she had no idea how much worse things were about to get. The police station interview room smelled like stale coffee and disinfectant. I sat across from Detective Sarah Martinez, no relation despite the shared last name, as she reviewed the photos and witness statements from the parking garage incident. My chemical burns had been treated by paramedics, but the red welts on my wrists served as permanent reminders of Karen's attack. This is pretty straightforward, Detective Martinez said, flipping through her notes. Multiple witnesses, video evidence, physical evidence of assault and property destruction. We are looking at charges of assault with a chemical weapon, destruction of property, and possibly intimidation. In the next room, Karen was spinning a completely different story. Through the thin walls, I could hear her voice rising and falling as she painted herself as a community protector who had gone too far in defense of neighborhood values. He has been terrorizing our community for months, she insisted to her interviewing officer. Parking violations, noise complaints, general disrespect for community standards. I am the HOA compliance coordinator. I have authority to enforce regulations. The detective across from me rolled her eyes. HOA authority does not include chemical warfare, she said dryly. That woman seems to think she is running her own personal kingdom. What Karen did not know was that her authority extended far beyond what she claimed. Over the past 6 months, police had received 17 calls from Willowbrook Gardens. Noise complaints against teenagers walking after dark. Suspicious person reports about delivery drivers. Harassment allegations that never quite rose to criminal levels but painted a clear picture of systematic targeting. She has been building up to this for a while, Detective Martinez explained. We have a file on her complaints, always targeting the same types of residents, always claiming community authority that she does not actually possess. After my interview concluded, I returned home to assess the full damage. My $2,000 suit was completely ruined, dissolved in places where the bleach had eaten through the fabric. The important business meeting had been postponed, costing me potential contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The chemical burns would heal, but the emotional trauma would last much longer. But Karen was not finished. Even facing criminal charges, she doubled down on her harassment campaign. That evening, she knocked on doors throughout the complex, rallying support for her version of events. She told Mrs. Chen that I was a dangerous element who threatened community safety. She warned Mr. Rodriguez that successful residents like me would drive up property taxes and force out working families. She convinced several newer residents that I was some kind of criminal mastermind using expensive clothes to intimidate honest neighbors. "We have lawyers," she announced during an impromptu gathering in the community center. "The HOA board stands behind my actions. We will fight these false charges and protect our community from people who think money makes them untouchable." Karen's confidence grew with each passing day. She hired an aggressive attorney who specialized in defending community activists against what he called frivolous lawsuits by entitled residents. She launched a social media campaign painting herself as a victim of wealth-based discrimination. She organized petition drives calling for my eviction from Willowbrook Gardens. "Rich people think they can buy their way out of consequences," she posted on the community Facebook page. "But this is America. This is a place where hardworking families have rights. We will not be intimidated by expensive suits and lawyer threats." The irony was staggering. Karen genuinely believed she was the victim in this situation. In her twisted worldview, my success made me the aggressor, and her chemical attack was justified self-defense against economic inequality. Her lawyer sent threatening letters demanding that I drop all charges and accept responsibility for provoking the incident. The HOA board, terrified of legal liability, began pressuring me to resolve the matter quietly through internal mediation rather than criminal court. "Think about the community," Board President Janet Walsh urged during a tense phone call. "This kind of publicity hurts everyone's property values. Surely we can work something out that benefits everyone involved." Karen was betting everything on her perceived community support and legal connections. She truly believed that her months of harassment had built enough goodwill to protect her from serious consequences. She thought her lawyer could intimidate me into backing down. She had no idea that every threat, every legal maneuver, every attempt at community pressure was being carefully documented. She had no clue about the nuclear option sitting in my home office filing cabinet. The papers that would end her world completely. The video went viral on Tuesday morning. Mrs. Chen had posted the parking garage footage on her personal Facebook page, and within hours it had been shared thousands of times. The clip showed Karen throwing bleach while screaming about wealth and community standards, followed by her complete lack of remorse as police arrived. My phone buzzed constantly with notifications. Friend requests from strangers, messages of support from across the country, interview requests from local news stations. The story had struck a nerve with anyone who had ever dealt with HOA bullies or neighborhood tyrants. HOA Karen attacks resident with bleach for looking too rich became the headline that launched 1,000 angry comments. Social media exploded with similar stories from other communities, other victims of systematic harassment by people drunk on petty power. But the viral attention brought unexpected consequences. Other Willowbrook Gardens residents finally found the courage to speak publicly about their own experiences with Karen's reign of terror. Dr. Williams was the first to go on record. The retired professor contacted Channel 7 News and described months of harassment over his home library being visible through windows. Karen had filed noise complaints about his reading lamp being on after 10 p.m. She had called the police to report suspicious academic activity when he received book deliveries. "She made my life hell for 6 months," he told the reporter, all because she decided that educated people were a threat to community values. Mrs. Chen followed with her own interview. She described how Karen had targeted her teenage son, calling police whenever he walked through the complex after school. Anonymous complaints about suspicious Asian activity had been filed with both the HOA board and local law enforcement. "My son was afraid to come home," she said, tears streaming down her face. A 16-year-old boy scared to walk to his own front door because this woman had convinced herself that he was dangerous. The revelations kept coming. Maria Santos from Unit 18 described harassment over her housekeeping business clients visiting her home office. Karen had filed complaints about excessive commercial traffic and tried to get Maria's business license revoked through the city planning department. James Fletcher, a young black professional, recounted months of parking violations and noise complaints that seemed to target him specifically. Karen had photographed his car daily, measured his parking job with a ruler, and filed police reports about loud music when he was not even home. "She made it clear that people like me were not welcome," James told the growing crowd of reporters. "Every day was a new violation, a new complaint, a new reason why I did not belong in this community." The pattern became undeniable. Karen had not been enforcing HOA rules. She had been conducting a systematic campaign of harassment targeting minorities, young families, professionals, and anyone who threatened her self-appointed authority. The Bleach attack was not an isolated incident. It was the inevitable escalation of months of unchecked bullying. Social media users dug deeper into Karen's background. They discovered her history of complaints at previous addresses, a trail of harassment that followed her from community to community. Property management companies that had banned her from rental properties, HOA boards that had removed her from positions after resident complaints. "She is a serial neighborhood terrorist," read one widely shared post. "This woman has been destroying communities for years." The HOA board finally took action, but only after the negative publicity threatened their insurance coverage and property values. An emergency meeting was called to address recent incidents that do not reflect Willowbrook Gardens community standards. Board President Janet Walsh read a carefully worded statement distancing the organization from Karen's actions. "The HOA does not endorse or support the behavior captured in recent social media posts. We are reviewing all complaints and compliance procedures to ensure resident safety and community harmony." But it was too late for damage control. The story had grown beyond a simple neighbor dispute. News outlets were investigating HOA abuse of power. Legal experts were discussing the broader implications of unchecked community authority. Civil rights organizations were examining patterns of discrimination in residential associations. Karen's world was collapsing, but she refused to accept responsibility. Her social media posts became increasingly desperate and unhinged. She claimed the viral video was edited to make her look bad. She insisted that the other residents were lying about their experiences. She threatened lawsuits against anyone who dared to criticize her community protection efforts. "I am the victim here," she posted on her personal Facebook page. "I am being destroyed by rich people and their lawyers because I stood up for working families. This is what happens when you challenge wealth and privilege in America. Her attorney began preparing for settlement negotiations, confident that media pressure and community backlash would force me to accept minimal compensation to make the story disappear. Karen still believed that her perceived authority and legal representation would protect her from serious consequences. She was about to discover how wrong she could be. The settlement meeting was scheduled for Thursday afternoon in a sterile conference room at Karen's attorney's office. James Morrison was everything you would expect from a lawyer who specialized in defending community activists. Expensive suit, aggressive handshake, the kind of smile that promised expensive hourly rates and questionable ethics. Karen sat beside him looking confident for the first time since the Bleach attack. She wore her best dress and had clearly prepared for what she expected to be a negotiation from a position of strength. Her months of community organizing had convinced her that public opinion was on her side. "My client has been the victim of a sustained harassment campaign," Morrison began, sliding a folder across the polished conference table to my attorney. "This entire incident was provoked by your client's pattern of antisocial behavior and community disruption." I sat quietly while the lawyers performed their opening dance. Karen kept shooting me looks that mixed contempt with satisfaction. She truly believed that this meeting would end with me paying her damages for the emotional distress caused by my provocative displays of wealth. "Furthermore," Morrison continued, "my client's actions were taken in her official capacity as HOA compliance coordinator. She was enforcing community standards against a resident who had repeatedly violated parking regulations, noise ordinances, and behavioral guidelines." My attorney, Sarah Kim, listened patiently while taking notes. She had reviewed all the evidence, interviewed the witnesses, and prepared for exactly this moment. But even she did not know about the ace up my sleeve. "Your client threw bleach on my client while screaming about his appearance," Sarah responded calmly. "This was not community enforcement. This was criminal assault motivated by jealousy and prejudice." Karen leaned forward in her chair. "Jealousy? You think I am jealous of him? I was protecting my community from someone who thinks money makes him better than everyone else." "Your community?" I asked quietly. "Yes, my community. The community I have protected and served for 8 months. The community where I enforce standards and maintain property values for hardworking families." Morrison nodded approvingly. "My client has invested significant time and energy in community improvement. She has the full support of the HOA board and numerous residents who appreciate her dedication to maintaining neighborhood standards." This was the moment I had been waiting for. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a manila folder thick with legal documents, property deeds, purchase agreements, incorporation papers, and transfer documents that told a very different story about who owned what in Willowbrook Gardens. "Before we continue," I said, placing the folder on the table, "there is something you should know about my relationship to this community." Karen looked puzzled. Morrison seemed annoyed by the interruption. Neither of them had any idea what was coming. I opened the folder and spread the documents across the conference table like playing cards. The property deed was on top, clearly showing the purchase date 6 months ago and the buyer's name in bold legal text. "I am not just a resident of Willowbrook Gardens," I said, watching Karen's face as understanding began to dawn. "I am the owner of Willowbrook Gardens, the entire complex. Every building, every unit, every parking space, every blade of grass." The silence in the room was deafening. Karen stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. Morrison's confident expression melted into confusion, then horror as the legal implications cascaded through his consciousness. 6 months ago, I purchased the entire property as an investment, I continued. The previous owner was facing bankruptcy and needed a quick sale. I decided to live in one of the units while I managed the transition and evaluated renovation possibilities. Karen's face went through several stages of shock. First disbelief, then recognition, then the dawning realization that every threat she had made, every harassment campaign she had conducted, every moment of intimidation had been directed at her own landlord. "That is impossible," she whispered. "You are just a resident, you follow HOA rules, you park in assigned spaces." "I follow the rules because I helped write them," I said. "The HOA board works for me. The community standards you claim to enforce exist at my discretion. Every violation you filed, every complaint you made, every threat you issued was directed at the person who literally owns your home." Morrison was frantically flipping through the documents, his legal mind processing the catastrophic shift in leverage. His client had not just assaulted a random resident. She had attacked the property owner, the landlord, the person with ultimate authority over her housing situation. "Every month for 8 months, you have paid rent to my property management company," I continued. "Every harassment campaign you conducted was documented by my staff. Every threat you made was reported to my legal department. I have been building a file on your behavior since the day you first knocked on my door." Karen was hyperventilating. The confident community protector had been replaced by a terrified tenant who suddenly understood the full scope of her miscalculation. "I want to go home," she said weakly. "About that," I replied, pulling out another set of documents. "We need to discuss your lease agreement and the violation clauses related to harassment of other tenants." Morrison looked like he wanted to disappear. Karen looked like she was about to faint. The meeting was just getting started. The legal avalanche began within hours of the settlement meeting. Karen's attorney withdrew from her case before sunset, citing irreconcilable differences and new information that significantly impacts our legal strategy. In lawyer speak, that meant he had discovered his client had attacked someone with the power to destroy her life completely. The criminal charges proceeded without any possibility of plea bargaining. Assault with a chemical weapon carries mandatory minimums that cannot be negotiated away, especially when the evidence includes video footage, multiple witnesses, and documented physical harm. Karen's public statements about teaching lessons and putting people in their place eliminated any possibility of claiming the attack was accidental. But the criminal case was only the beginning. The eviction process started immediately. Karen's lease contained standard clauses about harassment, intimidation, and criminal behavior that voided her tenancy agreement. 8 months of documented complaints against other residents provided overwhelming evidence of lease violations that had nothing to do with the Bleach attack. 30 days, I told her during our final face-to-face conversation. "You have 30 days to find alternative housing arrangements." Karen had aged years in the past week. The confident community enforcer was gone, replaced by a broken woman who finally understood the consequences of unchecked bullying. "Please," she begged. "I have nowhere else to go. I cannot afford to move again." "You should have thought about that before you threw bleach on your landlord," I replied without sympathy. The civil lawsuit proceeded simultaneously with the criminal case. Destruction of property, assault and battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of civil rights provided multiple avenues for financial recovery. Karen's homeowner's insurance refused to cover intentional criminal acts, leaving her personally liable for all damages. The financial devastation was comprehensive. Legal fees, criminal fines, civil judgment, moving expenses, and the cost of finding new housing in a market where her criminal record made her a liability. Karen's savings were wiped out within a month. But perhaps the most satisfying consequence was the transformation of Willowbrook Gardens itself. With Karen gone, the community began to heal from months of systematic harassment and intimidation. Dr. Williams organized a neighborhood book club that met weekly in the community center. Mrs. Chen's son joined the high school soccer team and invited teammates over without fear of noise complaints. Maria Santos expanded her housekeeping business with support from neighbors who had been too afraid to hire her services while Karen was watching. The HOA board was completely restructured with new leadership focused on actual community building rather than enforcement of arbitrary standards. Harassment policies were implemented to prevent future Karens from terrorizing residents. Community events replaced compliance meetings as the primary focus of neighborhood organizing. "It feels like we can breathe again," James Fletcher told me during a community barbecue. "For the first time in months, I can come home without looking over my shoulder." Karen's social media campaign backfired spectacularly. Her attempts to gain sympathy by playing the victim only attracted more attention to her history of harassment. Former neighbors from previous communities came forward with their own stories of systematic bullying. Property management companies shared records of complaints and evictions that painted a picture of a serial neighborhood terrorist. The viral video became a cautionary tale about HOA abuse of power and the dangers of unchecked community authority. Legal experts used the case to discuss broader issues of residential discrimination and harassment. Civil rights organizations cited Karen's behavior as an example of how arbitrary community standards can be weaponized against vulnerable residents. 3 months after the Bleach attack, Karen moved out of Willowbrook Gardens in disgrace. No farewell party, no community send-off, just a rented truck and boxes of belongings loaded under the watchful eyes of former neighbors who were finally free from her reign of terror. I watched from my balcony as the truck pulled away, carrying Karen toward whatever community would be unfortunate enough to house her next. Part of me felt satisfaction at seeing justice served. Another part felt sadness that it had taken such extreme measures to stop her harassment campaign. The burned suit still hangs in my closet as a reminder that bullies only understand power. Karen spent months terrorizing residents because she believed her authority was untouchable. She learned too late that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are delivered by the very people you try to destroy. Willowbrook Gardens thrives now. Property values have increased with the improved community atmosphere. New residents move in without fear of harassment. Children play in common areas without worrying about noise complaints. Families gather for community events that celebrate diversity rather than enforce conformity. Sometimes justice takes time. Sometimes it requires patience, documentation, and the courage to fight back against systematic bullying. But when it finally arrives, justice can be absolutely devastating to those who thought they were untouchable. Karen learned that lesson the hard way.